Sally and I are back again. In this session, we are going to continue our development of a simple open source ASP.NET 6 project that we call SOFI. The project is mainly helps, people that want to save date time, localized, time zones, countries, regions, whatever you are, whatever you do. It helps people kind of retain that data, modify that data, communicate this, expose that data. It's a great example, a great little project on the side that can, allow us all to see what it's like to build an enterprise level end-to-end software, including UI and maybe mobile if the time allows. And the last time we basically, Sally and I basically put in a simple example here. We basically put in the node, which is the main root file that you want to rely on to be able to kind of communicate with an Azure instance. So for those of you, just a quick reminder for people who, haven't been following much, what we're really trying to do is that we're trying to codify the provisioning process so we can source control it, so we can go and have other teams and other team members be able to contribute, so we don't have this one guy that has access to the cloud and everybody else doesn't. We want to make sure this is source controlled and it's governed by the entire team. So what we're really trying to do, really, it's really simple. You have Azure in here, and I want to be able, let's say this is Azure in here, and I want to basically go and say, okay, out of Microsoft Azure, I want to be able to write some code. I don't know where's the file at, but let's say, this is your code here, and I want this code to run. So this is my C# code, and this code will be running through a pipeline on GitHub, right? And then, the pipeline will execute that code and communicate with Azure and provision instances in the cloud. So if I want an app service, I can write code and provision an app service. If I want a database, it will create a database, and so on and so forth, right? And we also talked a little bit about being able to fulfill the requirements. So let me put here just GitHub pipeline. Okay. So just to also, quickly just to, talk about, what do we need, right? So Sophie Core is not gonna be like Sophie Portal. Sophie Portal is just a Blazor application. It doesn't have a database or anything, but Sophie Core is a little bit more dependent than that. Sophie Core wants to have a database server, and it wants to have a database, and it wants to have, app insights, and it wants to have all of these little resources so it can actually, retain data, communicate data, manipulate data, and all the good stuff that comes with instances that you can spin up in the cloud. So let's go back to Sophie here. Last time we basically did a couple of things. This file will inevitably be modified. We're just going to add a couple of more things in here just for the database connection. But for now, and just remember this, this is a simple enterprise application that fulfills the purpose of Sophie. There are different measures that can be taken, especially when it comes to, communicating to instances in the cloud that, can differ. It depends on how far you want to go. Do you want to spend, you know, $50,000 budget and two engineers working for 2 months straight, to basically, build you a Department of Defense level kind of security, or are you just moving some data around and it's not really that secure? You have to be cognizant of that. I see a lot of engineers kind of dig themselves a hole and they just kind of lose themselves in there when they basically go and say, let me use the latest and greatest technologies when doing to do a mom and pop grocery store shop application. That's not a very good decision. So a lot of these things are basic things, but if you want to go crazy, go crazy. I'm here to basically answer your questions and all that. Okay. So where do all of this starts? I want to be able to provision. Remember how last time we said we need a container, like a resource group. Resource groups are basically what helps us as engineers to be able to go and create a resource group so we can put all these resources inside of it. So at any point in time, if I want to delete the entire resource group with all the dependencies, I can just delete the resource group and everything inside of it will be deleted. So there's that concept in Azure that's called resource group, and that's like a bag where you put in your database and your app service and all the little things that need to basically control and manage properly your cloud instances. So just like how we do with our storage and APIs and everything else, I'm just going to create a simple partial class in here, and then I'm going to call it cloud broker.resource.groups.cs. And let's start with the interface as we usually do. Here's an interface and here's iCloud Broker like this. Okay, so this guy is an extension. What is that? Cloud? Did I misspell something? Oh, it's because it's a console application, so it didn't nest the files underneath. Okay, fine, cool. What is this guy doing? Active setting default standard. Okay, fine. Let's see. Can I? Yeah. Okay, cool. So this is iCloud Broker. That guy belongs to this guy here. It's just called iCloud Broker. It's just a partial class. And this partial class here, all that it's doing, it's exposing an interface where I can just go and say, I want to be able to provision resource groups. So this is the resource groups. What do I need from a resource group? I need three things to know whether I can create a resource group and delete a resource group. I'm sorry, Sally, do you have a question?
No, I'm good.
Mm.
Uh,
So, go ahead.
well, I will ask later. So.
Okay, sounds good. So I want to do three things because this provision project will not just help me create resources in the cloud. It will also help me delete resources from the cloud because you need both, right? You need to be able to create a database and maybe you're doing a demo and after the demo is over, you want to delete all these resources, right? So we need kind of three different functionality in here. So I'm going to go here and do a value task. This is my value task here. And I'm going to go ahead and say this is resource group. This resource group is a model that's coming out of the Azure Management Resource Manager. And then I'm going to go here and say create resource group async. And I'm just passing in here the resource group name. So that's the first thing that I'm building, being able to just create a resource group. Okay. The second thing is that I want to go here and say I want to be able to delete a resource group. So in here, I'm going to go and say delete resource group async. And also the exact same way I'm passing in just the resource group name. Resource group names in Azure are unique across a subscription. So since we're dealing with one Azure subscription, resource groups there are going to be very, very unique in that matter. And then the last thing in here, I just want to do a check. This here, check resource group exists async. Exist async, right? And also the exact same way I'm passing in the resource group name. So I have three functions here that we're going to implement today. One that creates a resource group, one that deletes a resource group, and one that checks whether a resource group exists or not. Let's go write the implementation. So I'm going to go here and create a new file. And this new file will be basically what cloudbroker.resource.groups.cs. So here is my implementation. And of course, this guy will be sad because we added in actually iCloud Broker in here.
That was my question.
Yep. This is iCloud Broker. I don't know why I forgot that one, but here we are. And then this guy should be sad because we didn't implement the resource group stuff. So I'm just gonna do a little trick in here. I'm gonna do control period, right? It's gonna give me or control dot because I was just talking to Stanislav, some really, really smart guy from Poland. He lives in Germany. And he said to me, when you said period, I had no idea what you're talking about. What's that period? And I said to him, oh, it's the full stop. He said, what's that? I said to him the dot. He said, got it. Okay. So I need to be a little bit more inclusive in the language that I'm using. So okay, cool. It's a little bit of an American English that's making us really, start telling people miles and feet and inches, and people are gonna be like, "What is this guy talking about?" Okay, I'm gonna probably stay with the proper metric system. Anyway, so okay, so this guy put together all of these. I want to put the check first. I want to put the create first. And I want to put the check second and maybe the delete last. Okay, because that's how actually we're going to be using it. Or I think check goes at the top. I think check goes okay, fine. We check before we delete and we check before we create. That's right. Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's implement that. The implementation of this is really, really sweet and simple. Remember how we put a lot of, well, not really a lot of effort, but we basically instantiated this Azure guy right here. That's exactly what we're going to be doing here. I'm going to be going here and saying, I want to check if a resource group exists, right? So I'm going to go here and say, this.azure. That's the guy that we worked on last time. And and then I'm just going to go and say resource group and then contains async and then pass in the resource group name. Done. So I'm basically saying check and see if my Azure subscription contains a resource group with this particular name. Okay, does that make sense? So I'm just basically going and talking to Azure and I'm saying give me an indication whether that particular resource group exists or not. Okay, that one is done. Let's go to the create. The create one is the one that's interesting. I can go here and say return await this dot Azure resource groups. It's fluent, so it's going to help me a lot with a lot of things. So this is define. I'm defining it and I'm saying this is a resource group name. Okay. And then I can select the region in here. The region is where you want your resource group to be deployed, Sally, and I'll talk to you about that in a second. So the region, what's my region? I can go here and say region.west US or something like that. Say region.west here, region, and then West US. Now, of course, some folks will come to me and say, Hassan, US West 2. Yeah, yep, there you go. So some people are going to go and say, Hassan, what if we want to create in multiple region? Again, we're creating a very simple app. We'll talk about how to expand on that app very soon. The one thing that I want it to be variable is the resource group name, but of course, this is subject to change. Now, before we continue with this, you might ask me, Sally, what are these regions and why do we need them, right? Let me tell you a little story about optimization in the cloud business. And it's a really nice story to tell. So let me go back to this guy here. What are these regions? You're gonna see that word a lot. Assume that this is the map. This is our world, Sally. So let's say, I wonder if I can get a map in here. That would be cool. Do I have a map? Can a brother get a map? Okay. Eh, okay, who cares? Okay, let's go here and let's say this is the map of our world. Sally. And let's say in here you have, let's say here you have the Americas, right? In here you have Europe, right? Oops, not this one. In here you have Europe like this, right? And then down here you have Africa. At the bottom here you have Africa, and then maybe at the side here you have Asia, and so on and so forth. So these are the regions around the world, right? And these regions, you know, they have customers, potential customers. Let's say you are building a business here in the United States, right? It makes sense that you provision your cloud instance in a region that is in the United States. Why is that? Because the closer your instance is to the people that will potentially consume it, the better the performance because there's no network latency, right? People don't have, like, if you have a customer in China, let's say, and this customer wants to access your website, their performance is going to be really crappy because they have to go all the way to your server in the United States to be able to get the data. That's quite a bit of distance. That's what we call network latency, right? Now, what gives Azure superiority over a lot of other platforms in terms of cloud systems is that Azure has the most regions around the world. Like if you say Azure regions like this, check this crazy. So Azure is all over the place. I just want to see the map. Give me the map. Azure regions map. My Lord, let's see. I think this is an accurate one. Look, we are in South Africa. We're in Dubai. We're in West India. We are all over the place. Let me open up this image in a better view here. Look, we're all over the place, right? That means wherever your customers are around the world, there is always a nearby data center where you can deploy your cloud instance and then immediately makes the performance much, much simpler and faster, to the people that are trying to access your website, right? So this is the difference here. If you try to access a site that's hosted in Japan or in China, it'll take a while. It doesn't matter how fast your internet is. You're making a bunch of hops. You make a bunch of hops in order for you to reach all the way down to that site, wherever it's being deployed. Now, you might ask me a question, you'll be like, well, what if you have a large app? What if you have customers in both regions, right? What if you have customers in Asia and in North America? How would that work, right? I'd be like, well, that's where you go and you do geo replication and you put in instances wherever your customers are, especially if your customers need really high frequency IO intensive operations. It basically helps a lot that you deploy in closer by regions to your customers. Does that make sense, Sally? Questions about this one?
No.
Okay, so that's how this is. So where does this all come from? The simplest way I can explain this is that you have it right here. If you just do dot like this, you'll see all the crazy different regions that Azure supports today. Germany, Northeast, Germany, North, US, Texas government, India, Central, all of them. And truly is just you just write the code and say, I want to deploy in Asia East. The actual resource group will be provisioned and deployed in a server in Asia. Now, for a lot of people, especially younger people that, are seeing this, they might say, so what? But back in the olden days, we had to provision our own servers, and it wouldn't even be in your wildest dreams to be able to go and deploy whatever you want. This is what the cloud infrastructure and the cloud systems, or infrastructure as a service offers. It gives you that power to deploy whatever you want anywhere in the world. Okay, friend. So there's that part, right? And then what else do I need to develop in here? The delete resource group. Very, very simple and easy. All I gotta do is just go here and say await this dot Azure dot resource groups. Come on. Azure resource groups dot delete by name async resource group name. Done. Just like that. Okay, so this is the resource group name, delete resource group async, and await. What is it mad about? The sync and I implicitly convert void. Oh, is this guy returning a void? Why is it returning a void? That's new. It didn't do that before. Okay, fine. Let's take this guy out. Be that way. Okay, here we go. And that means I just need to fix my interface to say delete the resource group and don't give me anything back. Sure. Okay, so this way we basically developed our very first component that we need to be able to build, cloud components. Let's jump into the next one, Sally. So let me go here and make a commit and just say brokers, resource, groups. That's create, check, and delete. Okay, so that's one commit. Okay, let's keep going. What else do we need after we create a bag? We need to put things in the bag. What's the first thing that I care about? I want to be able to build an app service, right? And then this app service needs, let's go ahead and just develop an app service, right? Let's go here. The app service is where your code is actually going to be deployed. That's where your code is going to be hosted, right? So let's go and create a simple interface in here, another interface, just very simple one. And I'm gonna go here and say iCloud broker, right? And then in here, I'm gonna say web apps.cs, just like that. Okay, let's put the tag in here like this. And this guy is partial. And just like the resource groups, I want to be able to go and say, I want to offer the ability to create a web app, right? So let's go here and say value task like this. And this is web app. So that's the web app that I want to build, right? And then I want to go and say create web app async. Now, because our web application is going to need a database connection, it's going to need a plan, it's going to need a resource group, we're going to have to pass in these parameters. So what's my web app name? That's the first thing. I also need a database connection string. I want to be able to connect to the database. Some people will go and say, no, don't pass a connection string. We want to be able to connect through service principal, whatever. I said, by all means, go ahead and do that. I'm trying to explain the foundation here, and then you can change that however you want. I also want a plan. So app service plan, that's the plan. And then there is a resource group. This is the resource group that you and I just created, right? So we're gonna build a resource group and then gonna put the app in that resource group. Okay, so that's the interface that I want to implement. Now let me ask you a question. I'm not gonna say delete web app. I'm gonna just keep it to create web app. Why is that? Why do you think is that? Hmm. Let's see if you're with me or not with me. I'll ask you questions, and you're gonna have to cloud broker dot webapps.cs. So in the resource groups, I went and said, here's a check and create and delete.
Yeah.
Why in the web app I'm only saying create? Why is that? Hmm. What do you think?
Mm.
Uh, I'll tell you why. Because once you delete a resource group, everything inside of it will go away.
That's the container to all. Okay.
So you don't have to worry about deleting a particular web app because everything inside that group will go away with it. Okay.
You want about particle only delete the web app, not the rest. Would that be the option?
There is absolutely nope. We want to provision an entire environment and take it down. I have yet to run into a scenario where I just want to partially delete single things.
Yeah.
Usually it's a bad idea because if you destroy your database and try to spin it back up, without having, all of this taken care of, what basically happens is that, now your app is down and you don't have a geo redundancy, it becomes a nightmare. If you want to take down an environment, take down the environment and spin it back up. It's
Mm.
exactly what people do when they use, things like Docker containers and all that. But I'm not, again, I'm just giving people the foundation, the basic minimum they can use, before we tell them about containerization and service fabric and all that. Okay, so there's that part. Let's go up in here and say return await this dot Azure. That's our friend, and then app services, right? And then web apps. And then we're gonna go and define that guy. See, it's very much the same language. So I want the web app name. Here's my web app name right here. And then I want to put it in a Windows machine. I can put it in Linux or Windows, right? So I'm gonna put it with existing Windows machine. That basically means I wanna pass in the plan with the existing Windows plan. That's the cost. With existing resource group, here it is, resource group. And then with .NET Framework version, because we're always running on the beta version, right? I'm just gonna go here and say .NET Framework version dot parse V. That one took me some time to think about, but it's good. And you don't need to use that if you're using an out of the box version of .NET 6. If it's not beta, you don't need that line completely. But because we're always living on the bleeding edge of technology, I'm gonna keep that line there. And then I want to give it the connection string, which is how my app service is going to connect to the database. And that connection string is going to take things like, let's see here, name, that's my default connection. That's where you put your connection strings, maybe value, database connection string. And then the type in here is connection string type dot, hold on, connection string type. And then I want to go here and say this is an Azure SQL Server. You can, of course, connect to Cosmos, whatever you want to connect to, that's fine. And then the last thing I want to say here is that create async. I just want to create an app service, and that's it. So this way, I'm basically creating an app service that has a plan, has a resource group running on .NET 6, running on Windows, and connected to this particular database. What do you think about that? Any questions here?
Mm, yeah, I got that.
So that's the app service. What else do I want to build? Let's build a couple of more things. Let's first commit this. I'm gonna go here and say brokers, right? And then create web app. Okay, see how every single step I'm taking a commit. It's like a checkpoint. It's like I'm saving a checkpoint, right? So, okay, so there's that part. What else do I want to build? Well, I have a plan that I need to build, and I also have a database server that I need to build. Let's start with the plan. Let's go here and say, here is my interface, iCloud broker dot plans.cs, right? That's my plans. And then inside the plan, let's again fix the header. Control K E takes away the edge. And here is cloud. And then I'm gonna go here and say value task like this. And I'm gonna go and say I app service plan. By the way, these things that you and I are doing right now, it only happens once per project. Once per project. So so this is why I don't expect people to actually remember doing all of that, but that's that. Resource group, here you go. A plan needs a resource group to live. So
So
here's my resource.
usually people go look at like previous project if they can recall. It's like similar project
That's
procedure.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely okay to go do that. Obviously, to me, it's a pretty fluent, right? Like you do this 50 times on 50 different projects, it becomes easier, but it's totally okay. You can always go look and see, what we need and all that. Okay. So okay, let's go build this guy here. So this is a cloud broker dot plans.cs. Here we go. And then control K, clean that guy out. Here's partial class, and then let's go here and say I want to public async value task. I think I app service plan. I app service plan. Here we go. Cool, cool, cool. Here's your guy. And then create plan async. And then we're passing in, I said the plan name and the I resource group. That's my guy here, and then that's my resource group. And then creating this is really straightforward. It doesn't really take much effort. You just go and say return await this dot Azure dot plan app service plans app service dot plans. I think there it is. See, I don't really like remember all of it off the top of my head, but you can figure out by the definition, right? I'm passing in a plan name like this, and then you can go, you expect that you're gonna go and say with resource groups, with region, that's right. So the region, here's my region. Let's pull this in and let's say US West 2. That's where you and I are right now. And then with resource group, here's your resource group, right? And then you're gonna go and say create async, something to that effect. I think with, oh yeah, with pricing tier, that's right. So pricing tier dot, I don't know, you get to select how big your app is. Let's go with, I usually go with what's it called, S standard S1, and then I can go here and say with operating system, what operating system you want to run. So I can go here and say operating system. I think I said Windows earlier, so it's gonna be Windows. And then what else it needs? Create a sync. There it is. So you're creating your app service. So this is your plan. See how you defined what price, what resource group, what region, what operating system is going to be running, and all that kind of good stuff. See, so like I said, a lot of these stuff it's fluent, and they say it's fluent API because it's actually really Really simple and easy to work with because you can just guess what the next step is, especially if you're familiar with the cloud components. Okay, so that's the plan, right? That's the plan broker. Let's go here and say brokers, create app service plan.
Just I have a question about the operating system. If I wanted to use, for
Mhm.
example, I want to have both Mac and Windows. How would I make it as a plan?
So the problem is that Apple is not super friendly by, when it comes to allowing um, app services to run on Mac OS because the hardware and the software with Mac is inseparable. I mean, there is always the people that do the Hackintosh. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Hackintosh. They basically run Apple stuff in a non-Apple hardware, right? And there might be a way to do it, but normally it used to be at least a lot harder to kind of find a Mac instance. Today we only use this Mac because they're also expensive. Today or we only use this Mac instances in our build when we try to publish iOS apps. But
Mm.
you going with Linux is definitely the cheapest option, and then the second cheapest option after that would be Windows. So if you go here, you'll see it's offering you Linux and Windows only for a reason.
If you want to have both, so how would you plan it? Like, um, you know,
Then you need two different app services because you can't run more than one operating system on one instance.
okay,
It's one to one.
yeah, I got you. Yeah, that was my question.
Okay, perfect. So what do I have here? What did I do here? Nothing. Okay. Okay, perfect. Now let's get the other one. The next one here is for us, we did plans, we did web apps. The big one is to create the storage, right? So let's go create the database basically, right? Let's go up in here and go and say, I want to create, here is my code, here's interface, iCloud broker dot storages dot cs, like this. Okay, here's my storages. Let's go up in here and let's partialize this guy. What do I need from a storage? In order for you to build a storage, you need to build a server. And inside that server, you build the database. So one server could have multiple databases, right? So a database server could have multiple databases. And that's basically what we try to do here. We're trying to kind of create, this particular pattern here. So I'm going to go up in here and say, okay, I want to create a value task. iSQL Server. If you are using something else, find your model and create whatever. So this is create SQL Server. This is not a SQL database. This is a SQL Server. That's the container of that. So that's my SQL Server name. And also I want iResource. Let's break those down a little bit. Here we go. See, everything has to have what, Sally, the iResource group, resource group like this. Because that's where everything is containerized, resource group. So let me ask you this. What's the difference between a resource group and a plan? Does the resource group go inside the plan or does the plan go inside the resource group?
I think plan goes inside the resource group. I
That's
recall
right.
it correctly. Yeah.
That's right. That's exactly what it is. Okay, let's create a SQL database, right? And this is my SQL database name. Okay, do I need to put the database in a resource group or do I need to put the database in a SQL server? What do you think?
It goes in a resource group.
Nope, it's in a SQL server because this guy is the container of this guy.
Yep. Yep.
But the container of this guy is the resource group.
Resource group.
Okay, cool. We're gonna add a third function in here and I'll come back to that in a second, but let's just implement these two for now. Just for now, I'm gonna go and say, oh, I wanna build storages, right? I'm gonna go and build my storages. So let me go down here. This is my interface. I'm gonna go here and say class. Here is my cloud broker dot storages dot cs. Okay, here's my guy. Here's the partialization. This. And let's build the first one. We want to build the the database server first, right? Because there's no database without a server. So public async value task like this. And I'm gonna go down here and say iSQL server, right? That's my SQL server, right? And we said create SQL server async, and I'm passing in the SQL server name, and I'm passing in what? The resource group, right? Resource group. Go sleep, stay with me.
No, I'm here. I'm
Okay, okay, resource, okay, we're here. Okay, perfect. Okay, let's go down here. So this is my resource group. And then I want to build my SQL server. So I'm going to go and say return await this dot Azure SQL servers, right? And then let's take a dot here and let's define what do we pass? The SQL server name, right? And then I want to say which region I'm in. Always I'm going to say, because you're just building a simple app and you're not scaling or any of that stuff. So it's going to be US West 2, right? And then with existing resource group, okay, there it is, right? And then I can go here and say create async, but there's an important thing that I have to do here with security, right? So I need to add in with admin login, right? So we need an admin name and with admin password, and we need an admin password in here. There's multiple ways to do this. This is just beginner level foundation. So something somewhere, Sally, is gonna need to give us the information about the admin username and password. Something, somewhere, right? Do you remember how I told you we're gonna still come back to this guy and add a couple of more things? This is the day and age where we do these two things. This is exactly this is exactly the time where we're gonna need to modify this. Remember I told you we're gonna need to change this guy a little bit, right? To make sure that it has a little bit more information in here. Okay, what are the other information? I need to go here and say, I want to define private read-only string, right? Admin name and private read-only string admin access. It's the admin password, but we're not supposed to use that word. You know, it makes your code vulnerable and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so this is admin name, get environment variable, Azure admin name. And in here, this dot admin access environment, same thing, get variable Azure admin access. These two values, Sally, is how we know the username and password for the admin. You know what I mean? So this is how I know the username and password for the admin that I want to work with.
So why you call it access instead of password? What is the logic?
Because if you put password, it makes you vulnerable. It makes it easy for hackers to find what you're doing, right? And in some places around the world, if you have like your code shouldn't be indicative of where your secrets are. Normally we do something called secret string. And this it's secure string. It's its own type, secure string. And this secure string, even if you're a developer and doing debugging, you wouldn't be able to kind of figure out what's actually being passed in. But that's a story for another day. That's a little bit of advanced topic. Okay, so these are two things. What that basically means, this basically is telling me I need to go in here and pass in these values, right? I need to pass in these values to the storage piece, which is this guy. So now I can go here. Can I just go here and say this dot admin name? And I can go here and say this dot admin access. Okay. What that basically means now is that these are variables that are being passed in through environment variables. And I'm just going in there and passing in that information as input parameters. Cool. Do we have a deal? So this creates a SQL server. What's the other thing that I want? I want to be able to go here and say this is value task, I SQL database. Remember, we said we're going to create both. I SQL database like this, and I'm going to go up in here and say I want to create my databases. Create database SQL database async. I say SQL because there's Cosmos, there's Postgres, there's all these different kinds, right? And this is SQL database name here, and then I want to pass in, what do you think? What's the container of this database? Hmm, what do you think? Huh?
SQL Server.
SQL Server, that's right. There's iSQL Server. There you are. SQL Server.
I see.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, you're with me. Okay, you're still here. This is how I know people fell asleep or not. Okay, so let's return await this dot Azure, right? And then SQL Server, and then databases, and then we can go and say define, and this is my SQL database name. See, it's becoming more and more familiar
Yeah.
with existing SQL Server, and then I'm gonna go and say create async. Done and done, just like that, right? Why is this guy freaking out? What do you return, buddy? iSQL database. Oh, this guy picked it up from the wrong. See, like I said, there's Cosmos and there's all different kinds of things. We want to make sure we pick up the right type. I have the right type right here. Okay, perfect. Now, this is all good and dandy, but there's a problem here. When we went and build a web app, right, we said we need that database connection string. Right? Where the heck are we going to get that from? We need to kind of have our broker provide us with the username and password for the admin so we can work with that, right? You can do it in different ways. You can just go and say return a tuple of multiple values. You could do that. Or you can just define a model. I'll define a model. I'll go here and say, you know, in my database under models in here, I'm going to just go create a new folder. And under new folder, I'm just going to say storages. Storages. And then you can, under storages, you can go here and say SQL. You can call it SQL database access. And this SQL database access is just going to provide me with two values, the admin name and the admin access. That's all it's doing. It's just a very simple model. So prop string admin name, prop string admin access. That's it. Okay, cool. Admin name and admin access. What am I going to do with that? I'm going to jump real quick right back to my storages. And I'm going to go here and say I need to define a function that returns the database access or SQL database access, like we called it. Because that's how I'm going to build that connection string. So this is get admin access. And really, that what this guy is doing, really, in essence, is just going and saying, give me that information so I can build a connection string. So public admin SQL database access. Here it is, and then get admin access. Oh, get admin access like this. And what this guy is basically returning a new SQL database access with, it has the admin name. This is that admin name and admin access. This is the admin access. That's it. That's all it's doing. It's basically creating, you know, a simple method that I can work with to build this connection string down the line somewhere. Okay. Cool, 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 cool. Okay, let's commit that one then. Let's run a quick cleanup on our entire solution. Come on. Here we go. Okay, and then I'm gonna go here and submit and say brokers, right? And this is storage, create database and server and access. All right. So that wraps up the foundation layer that we need, right, to basically build the components that we need to run an app service. To visualize this a little bit, and let me just show you how this world is going to look like. if I go into this view here, what we basically said, I said create a resource group just like this. And inside that resource group, I want to create a SQL server, right? So that SQL server is right here. And inside the server, there's the database. So that's that guy. And then I said I want a web app, a web app that is this guy. And then I said I want all the information I need so this web app can connect to that server. So this is our web app, and this is our server. You good?
Yep.
So there's these two, right? And all of this is containerized within what we call a resource group. So that's my resource group right here. Group like this. And this resource group also requires a plan, right? So it's Azure plan. What's it called? Plan. Azure. See, that's OCD for you right there. I have to find the exact right icon, and it has to be perfect. Let's see. This is, I don't know, something in here. Um, I thought it was just right there when I wrote an app service. It was just right there, and then I lost it. Yeah. So anyway, you can see all of these little icons, each one of them when you're designing an architecture for an enterprise system, you're gonna have to be very specific about your flow. How do you want your flow to work? How do you want, so let me do an app service like this. Wait, I saw it. This guy, right? Environment. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Anyway, a plan, something like this. You're basically going and saying, this is my plan. And this plan is governing this guy. It's telling this guy what operating system to work with. And then the resource group is governing all of that. That's basic anatomy of building a simple a API infrastructure. You want to go out there in the cloud, you want to control it through code. Of course, you can do all of this simply by just using the UI. You could just go through it, but if you do it through the UI, what's the risk in that, Sally? What's the problem if we let people go and create these resources, in the UI by hand? What happens? What do you think? Hmm. If we let people do that by hand, that means anybody could just go in and delete your entire database, and you have absolutely no idea how did that happen. But if you do it through code, there will be pull requests. The pull request has to be approved. It has to be executed. So many things need to happen before you actually let something like this go into, especially if you have production environments and all that kind of interesting stuff.
Yep.
Okay, so let's go back here into the code. Do you have any questions? So that wraps up the broker side of this thing. There will be other brokers that we're going to build, something like configurations and logging, and we're going to need a configuration broker that goes and reads an app settings file to pull that up, but that will be for the next session. We can do that in the next session.
So this is by basically end of the provision, using the provision.
That's just the foundation part of the provision. There's services and processing services. So
Okay.
there's a couple of other things. Yeah, provision is not done yet. It's 33% done specifically. Just 33%. Provision is more interesting as a project because you're basically breaking down all of these instances. Like at some point in time, you might switch from Azure to AWS. You want to deploy in AWS. How much change would that require in your code to do that? What do people do today? This is a new approach, right? Not a lot of people do it this way, if any. Mostly people who are standard compliant that will build it this way. But what do people do today, Sally, to provisioning Azure instances? They use something called it's called what was it called? Um, I don't know, YAML, I think, something like that. YAML, something like that. So they go and they basically build project with code, something like this. This is the CLI. People use like they provision it with a different language and a different technology, and there isn't much autocomplete there, and then it becomes really, really hard to kind of, remember that. We do all of this in C sharp, so you don't have to do none of that craziness. All of it is built in C sharp. There it is, something like that. You build and, something to that effect. I don't remember exactly, but people use particular technologies and other languages to do that. We do it a little bit differently. We go and say, we're going to do it in C sharp, right? The entire infrastructure is going to be built in C sharp. Your build pipelines are built in C sharp. Your APIs, everything is built in C sharp because you can, because the language is allowing you to do that. And it's giving you the capability, like you saw as I'm typing, it's telling me you need to add in with region, with, you don't get that kind of flexibility with more scripting languages. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so for the people watching us, this code has been pushed to this branch. It's users Hassan Habib slash provision initialization project. Feel free to go there, check it out, check our changes. I made sure it's commit by commit, so you can just very simply and easily go and track what we're doing. Sally and I, what we've been working on. I expect like, probably, a couple of more sessions and we'll be done with provisioning. And then we can start talking about, building functionality, right? And there will be some interesting session where we actually hook up, our so there it is. There's the branch. And if you look at the commits, you can see the entire history there of every single step. See, I want to provision the storage broker, app service, creating web app. Here's the resources. See, when you break down into smaller commits like this, it becomes really, really easy to track your changes, to track what you're building. People can now easily know what you're talking about and what you're working with. Okay, friend. Okay, cool. Tomorrow we start talking a little bit about, configurations, talk a little bit about building foundation services that can support all of this broker work that we've done. Does that sound like a plan?
Back.
All
I'm excited.
right. Awesome. I'm excited too. And for people watching us, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, compliments, feel free to drop a comment in the comment section. And as usual, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys in another video. Thank you, Sally. Have a good night. Bye.
Good.
You too. Bye. Bye.